You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Termina Axel Schwarzenegger.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Happy Friday. This is Duane Rollins. Happy to be back on my beautiful Yeti microphone after a few days on my crappy phone microphone. Joining us on the line along with Kevin Laramee is Charles Boehm of MLS and many other places out there. Charles, how you doing?
Just taking it one day at a time here in Trump's America.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we'll leave that well enough alone. No wall yet? Okay. All right. I feel like I'm there. So go ahead.
I was just giving you guys a chance to taunt me a little bit, to brag from up north there above the line.
Why would we do that? We like you, Charles. We would never do that to you.
All right.
Thank goodness.
The Canadian Premier League might have a few more teams than we thought of if things go wrong. Anyway, all the coastal teams. All right.
That CFL expansion went pretty well a few years back. So who knows, right?
Yeah, you never know. All right, let's get off this topic before we lose the listeners. The big trade. I don't know if it's official yet, but certainly it seems pretty official right now. Kevin Molino traded for a whole lot of money, $450,000 GAM, $200,000 TAM. I love that I can tell you that too, along with Patrick McLean, the keeper there. Charles. First off, that seemed like a lot of cash for a player like Molino, but you tell me, is that a good move for Minnesota?
That is a lot of MLS monopoly money. Although I should say we bat around terms like monopoly money, but this is real, actual money. This is effectively the dollar amounts we're talking about. You can say it's getting sort of funneled through the MLS salary structure, but this is an enormous amount of money. Obviously, We've only since draft day have we been officially informed of the specific dollar amounts, but I imagine this ranks up there in among one of the top 5 or so biggest transactions in terms of numbers and assets in modern MLS history. Kevin Molino is a very talented player. As a former Caribbean soccer person, I definitely don't want to throw any shade on Molino. He's a great player. I think he could do some really good work for Minnesota, but it certainly appears that there's a little bit of a, I don't know, what would you call it, a familiarity markup maybe. This is a coach going after one of his ex-players that he clearly likes, he values a lot, and probably paying a little bit of a premium to get that guy. So we'll see. It's the point has been made that Molino is probably going to play as a central 10 in Minnesota's system. I think Heath believes that's where he's best. That's where he can maximize his abilities. He hasn't been able to do that in Orlando because of a guy named Kaká. So maybe we're going to see a side of Kevin Molino that we haven't yet in MLS, and that will justify this hefty price tag. But there's so many factors swirling around here. Minnesota, open training camp with 12 roster spots still unfilled. They've filled several of those this week. I think they're going to be okay, but they are a little bit behind where their expansion brethren, Atlanta United, are. I don't know if there's a little bit of a panic that maybe influenced this decision as well. But they made a big move, and now we're going to get to sit back and watch and see how it unfolds this season and decide if it was worthwhile.
All right, let's turn our attention to the other side of the equation on this. Obviously, a lot of money coming in for Orlando to spend. Any idea what they might be looking for in terms of using that money, or is this too early days to try and speculate that way?
No, I think we can make a few educated guesses. Jason Kreis has he and his staff have been crisscrossing the globe quite literally this offseason. I think they started almost immediately after the close of the regular season, traveling to Latin America, to Europe. There's Central America. I know he's been to a number of different places, and I'm sure they're looking under every nook and cranny for the players that he wants. He's identified a couple of weaknesses in his squad, but the thing that stuck with me most that Kreis has talked about is sort of the psychological makeup of his team. I don't think he really loved the tenor of the locker room, or the personalities, or the lack of certain kinds of personalities. He went out and got everybody's favorite Canadian midfield scrapper, Will Johnson. I think he wants more of those types of personalities, as well as upgrading the overall sort of talent that he has on the field. I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and find another sort of commanding central defender, or somebody that can be kind of a rock in the back. And then they may look for a little bit more steel in midfield, or just to try and build depth elsewhere. But I think Kreis has a clear way of how he wants to play, kind of a modern version or modern evolution of what he did at Real Salt Lake. I think they want to play at tempo in a 4-2-3-1 system, and so he has a good wad of cash to go spend, although I wouldn't be surprised if they don't really splash it out until the summer.
I just wanted to touch back on Minnesota for a second, Charles, with you, or dare I say Orlando 2015, because if we're looking at the setup of this team, Adrian Heath, the coaching staff, and now Kevin Molino, we're looking at a team that is looking to build and use the experience and the knowledge of Adrian Heath and his staff of going through that transition in 2015 when Orlando went from the USL to MLS. How important was that knowledge base, that experience for Adrian Heath when Minnesota decided to hire him?
Oh, I think it was key. Now, we can certainly say you can make the case easily that he wasn't successful, in the sense that they in Orlando, they had big ambitions from day one. They wanted to make the playoffs right out of the gate. And they haven't done that in either of their first two seasons, of which he was in charge of, a year and a half or so. I think he probably learned some tough lessons there. The interesting thing about Heath is that he was so involved in that club from the ground up, even going way back to the USL days, and the move from Austin. I'm sure he's doing his best to sort of nod to the experiences, learn from the harsh lessons of falling short of the playoffs. But this is kind of a footballing ideologue too. I think he definitely has a way he wants to play. He likes to attack. Those Orlando teams were enjoyably open, at least from the neutrals' perspective. And I get the sense that he's trying to inject more experience than those teams had with what he's doing here in Minnesota, and make things a little stiffer at the back, make them tougher to play against. And I think there's some fascinating things happening here in terms of sort of club characters and sort of regional characteristics that we're seeing in these two expansion teams, as we have in the past. I think Minnesota wants to carry some of their NASL identity that they have as a club, which was, sort of Midwestern values, hardworking, diverse, but stout.
When you're looking at Minnesota, they will be forever linked with Atlanta, their expansion brethren. Atlanta has made a lot of splash for the last few weeks, and yesterday it was announced that there are over 27,000 season tickets sold. How impressed are you, if you are, with Atlanta United, Charles?
I am, certainly, and there's been some resentment, I think, up in Minnesota, because they feel like they're getting talked about a lot less. That the splashiness of what Atlanta has done is being maybe overly celebrated a bit, considering neither side has stepped on the field in MLS. But Atlanta have given us a new blueprint for what an expansion team wants to do, can do. The ambition they've shown is really impressive. It helps when you have an extremely wealthy patron in the form of Arthur Blank. This is a guy who's has not hesitated to splash the cash on his NFL team, the Falcons, and now he's doing the same here. But they're not just going out and making sort of splashy signings. They are doing that. They're shopping heavily in Latin America. They went out and got a big name coach in Tata Martino, but they're also building an academy system from the ground up. They've built really impressive partnerships in what is generally a chaotic youth soccer scene in Atlanta. They've already managed to sort of put themselves in at the top floor there, and they've signed homegrown players, multiple homegrown players, before they've even taken the field in MLS. So it remains to be seen. Expansion teams are a good example in MLS of that old adage of Mike Tyson about everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So Atlanta haven't gotten punched in the face yet, but things look great, and there's as much to like there as any expansion club in MLS history.
Charles, Minnesota might not like that no one's talking about them, but I don't know if they'd like what they would hear if people were talking about them. I have fears about that team, and I think DC United 2013, when I look at them right now, maybe that's a bit of an extreme suggestion, but is there a possibility that this could be one of the worst expansion launches of all time?
Yeah, that possibility has definitely been broached. I think Grant Wall of Sports Illustrated explicitly mentioned that idea based on the conversations he's had with insiders around the league. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're a little bit unlucky in the sense that they've gotten plunked down in a tougher environment in the West than Atlanta has in the East. But I think they're going to be competitive. These examples, and again, it's very much similar to Orlando and New York City 2 years ago, where you have an existing club that's effectively been promoted here, and then you have a brand new entity getting off the ground, and there's pros and cons to both of those sets of circumstances. What I think it does serve Minnesota well to have a club culture established, to have a little bit of an identity in terms of who they are on and off the field, and again, I think that club represents its region as well. This is not that's not a place that's known for flash. They're not quite the same culture as Atlanta, for example. So I think in a lot of ways, I think some of their fans are okay with them being a little bit quiet and under the radar. But of course, we always have to remind ourselves here, this is MLS, as Seattle showed yet again last year. You can dawdle around and fritter away half your season and still get down to things and make some moves in mid-year and be competitive. So they may be in the mix, but I don't see them making the playoffs. But for any expansion side to make the playoffs in the modern era is a huge achievement. So no shame if they don't reach that hurdle.
You're talking to someone in Toronto. I'm well aware of Seattle's late season changes. Stephen Fry's fingertips away. Anyway, Charles, let's move to a different. It's been a week or so now since the Dax McCarty trade that sort of caught everyone off guard, particularly from a New York perspective. I felt anyway. We can understand why Chicago would want him. He fits into what they need quite a bit. But a week into this, sober reflection, do we have any greater idea of why New York's feeling confident enough to move away from him?
Well, New York is a system club now. They have a very clear identity tactically. I guess you could say sort of organizationally and transactionally too. They are part of a global network that shares ideas, that shares tactical concepts, and occasionally even shares players. Considering, there's a lot of layers to this. You have the Metro Stars / Red Bulls organization and the club's history. So much of it was marked by tumult, by turnover, by terrible decisions of management, and the fans still carry those scars. So when a player sticks around as long as Dax did, does as much good stuff, is central to as much success as he was, and sort of pledges allegiance to the club and the region and the fan base, that always is tough for them to part with. And I think they probably feel that sting of a departure like that a little bit more than most fan bases in MLS. But it fits into the plan. New York is looking around. They're looking at the types of players they're churning out with regularity in their academy. I mean, they are one of a few clubs in MLS that have literally their pick of the litter every year. They can decide who they want and who they don't. The homegrowns that they don't like, they can ship down to their USL team and let them season a bit. They can let them go finish college, or they can try to pluck them out of college early. I mean, they have so much talent coming through the youth ranks, and you look at the number 6 role in MLS across the league, and in American development in general, that is one of the areas of depth and strength. It's a role that is relatively straightforward for American systems to churn out. So when they saw they could get significant assets for Dax, I think it just made sense. Sean Davis filled in for Dax when he was hurt last season in mid-year and did quite well, and they've got more guys like him. So I think New York looks at it and feels like this is a buy low, sell high situation.
Charles, we talked about Atlanta a few minutes ago, but we didn't even talk about the big news that came out yesterday officially. We've been talking about it for a few weeks, but it was made official. Even though Burrow talked about a few weeks ago, Atlanta announced yesterday that they signed Brad Guzan to join the team in July. What are your thoughts on the Brad Guzan signing for Atlanta? Is it going to be a game changer for them? And how do you prepare your team for a part-time goalkeeper to start the season and then to go with your full-time goalkeeper?
Yeah, that's not ideal for them, but I think it makes a lot of sense in the long term. Guzan has very much sort of trod this path that a lot of American and Canadian players take. This will be his second go around as an expansion goalkeeper. He was one of the top draft choices back when Chivas USA first entered the league. He got shellacked, grew into an everyday starter in that baptism by fire, went abroad. Did some good things, and now I think he's sort of hit a little bit of a wall in England, and is ready to get minutes, is ready to come home, and it makes sense for both the player and the club. I'm sure they don't love having to wait around for him, but again, we know that there's a very generous learning curve that this league provides you with. So they can look at this as a chance to blood someone younger, get someone some minutes, and then Brad can kind of ride in here to the rescue. I think he's going to do fine. Again, tall order for him and his team to be in the postseason picture, but for the long term, that's a sort of a player you can build your club around. You can advertise with him. They love having national team players. I mean, that's part of their pitch to guys like him and Greg Garza is we want national team players at our club. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and in a year or two here, those few months that he misses in the spring won't be very significant.
A good news was announced a few days ago, a player that is near and dear to your heart and your coverage. Charles, Clint Dempsey passes fitness test with flying colors, back at training full time. How happy are you for Clint, and where does Clint go from here on out?
Yeah, it's great news for anybody that watches this league that enjoys creative players, unique personalities, both sort of on the ball and off the field as well. I think nobody wants to see a player's career sort of cut short without any sense of closure. We see it a lot with concussions. In Clint's case, it was a heart issue. It's really sad and frustrating for anybody to see a player not have a chance to go out on their terms. So in that regard, I think it's great. I don't know if Clint's got another year, a few more years in him. I mean, it's going to be fun to watch. He's one of those players. I really enjoy this process. Maybe it's because I'm getting old myself now, but smart players adapt their game to an aging body and use their brain when their legs don't quite do what they did as a young 20-year-old. And Clint's an exhibit A of that, and it's really been enjoyable to watch. A lot of people wrote him off even a couple of years ago as being over the hill. But he's just so intelligent. He's still so skillful on the ball. I think he's just a real asset for the U.S. national team and for MLS. And so I'm excited at the chance to watch him do his thing a little bit more. And I think Seattle are now a great situation for him because he can be a part of their title defense. He doesn't have to carry the load. They've got a lot of great component pieces around him. I don't know if he's going to be a super sub. I think certainly to start the year he will be. Or whether he's going to be, a high mileage guy, but it's going to be fun to watch.
Taylor Twelvin today is reporting that Landon Donovan is going to move into a TV role, which will end speculation that he might come back again. I think it will end it for good this time. He did have his one little run out, but I'm interested in what your thoughts are on the current situation, the team that he is most associated with, the LA Galaxy, and where their direction is right now. What kind of season do you see the Galaxy having?
Yeah, I really don't know. I would, if I had to make a call, I'd say this is going to be a year of transition for them because despite the fact they've promoted within, and of course, generally it's a sign of a healthy organization when you can replace a departure like Bruce Arena with two guys from within your organization. But the personalities on offer here are so different. Kurt Anolfo is a very different type of person, a different type of coach than Bruce Arena. Pete Vagenas, who's stepped into the GM role, is very different from Bruce. There's been sort of a general whisper in some quarters that they're going to be more of an organic homegrown based club. They don't want to quite splash as much cash as they have in the past on marquee signings. They want to, trust the pipeline they've built, which wasn't necessarily used to anywhere near its full potential by Arena, who's generally seen as somewhat of he's pragmatic but a veterans guy. So and also I think can do a lot of good things if he trusts this the Galaxy 2 and the Academy pipeline. But it's hard to do that on the fly. And you can see in some of the signings they've made, they went out and got a 30-something Jermaine Jones. They can't quite, and they may get Jona Dos Santos and have both Dos Santos brothers in the fold as DPs. So they can't quite go cold turkey on the splashy designated players. But I think we're going to see an evolution towards something a little bit more value conscious. And that's a good thing because they're sitting on the biggest talent pool in North America.
The narrative in the city that I'm sitting in right now is what TFC has to do to avoid the quote-unquote MLS loser hangover. The idea that if you lose the MLS Cup final, that long season combined with the disappointment and the emotional letdown of having to start all over again can create a slow start, which can get you in a hole. They've made a lot of changes in the offseason, but I'm just curious whether you feel that that the roster as it stands in Toronto is good enough to do it again and get back to the top again.
Well, there's a couple of ways to spin that. It was certainly the 2015, both 2015 MLS Cup finalists had a big hangover there, even the ones that won it. So that's a risk anytime you get to the mountaintop, whether you're one step short or not. If you want to spin it a more positive way from TFC's perspective, there's sort of a learning curve in the postseason. It's rare to see a team, they won their first playoff game in franchise history in the same year they reached MLS Cup. So a lot of times I've seen teams have to sort of experience setback in the postseason, and then maybe the next year they get over the hump. When you look at what Columbus did, in a way, Seattle. I mean, Seattle was banging on that door for a long time, and finally, found themselves in a situation where they could get all the way to the top. So Toronto have been there, done that now. I think if they have the right leadership, if Greg Vanney makes the right moves, if they rotate their squad the right way. And I got to say, I love the sort of roster building they've done there. They've tried to build their personnel in a way that fits the system they want to play. There's coherence. There's a plan. So I hope that they stick to it. You guys know that was a very rare quality in Toronto FC's early days. The stability, the structure, the trusting in the process, I think can go a long way if they stay the course and get back in the postseason and then take their turn at the crapshoot again.
If only there were voices up here screaming at them to be stable for 7 or 8 years. But anyway, Charles, we were.
Well, now you have to understand that the flip side of that is when they make those decisions of stability, you have to accept that there may not be as much sexiness to things.
Exactly. It's kind of been
they may not have as many bloody big deals now, and now that TFC are reliably good.
True story. Lewicki walked past me at the MLS Cup final, and I looked at him straight in the eye and said, "No, this is a bloody big deal." He laughed and slapped me on the back and kept walking. Anyway, all right, Charles. One quick question before we wrap you up, and I do thank you for your time on short notice today. The CCL has undergone some changes, new format coming in for the next edition. Means that in Toronto's case, they will play their first game in the CCL 20 months after they qualified, which is a bit strange. Just your general thoughts on that new format. Is it the right direction for the tournament?
Well, look, if any of my friends who work at CONCACAF are listening, please don't take this as too harshly, but that's a routinely mystifying organization, right? We see it in a number of contexts here. They've had their heads together, turning over, all these big ideas about dramatic changes to improve and make that CCL competition more compelling. We're all very eager to see what that was actually going to look like when they rolled it out this month, and we kind of got a damp squib, as they say. I think it's nice to see, I guess, that they're trying to add more value to each match by doing away with the group stage, but they've yet again gone back to the format that the CCL was designed to turn a page from, which is the old Champions Cup format, which is start things in early spring, things get wrapped up relatively quickly. The tournament doesn't necessarily have a big footprint on the calendar, and thus I think it's limited in its ability to have a big footprint on our consciousness. The coaches may like it because they don't have to deal with as much fixture congestion over a important stretch of the MLS season. But I've been frustrated over the years to see how many excuses MLS clubs and coaches find for not winning this thing, and those still remain. They're still going to have to play important games very early in their preseason. They're still going to have to play a very difficult game in terms of their periodization process early in the year, and they're probably still going to be facing Mexican clubs that are at full bore while they're just getting ramped up. So at some point, you just have to go out and hunt the trophy and do what Montreal did, make it matter, maybe put your regular season second priority if it really matters to you. And, as we've seen, the Canadian clubs have generally been much better at that than the American clubs, and I don't necessarily know that that's going to change.
Yeah, when I saw the new format, the first thought that crossed my mind, having been around for a while, was, it's the CCC again, not the CCL. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Charles, anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
Usual stuff. Folks can check me out on Twitter at CBOEHM. I've got some fun stuff coming out on MLSsoccer.com, USsoccerplayers.com over the next days and weeks. So I always appreciate people reading.
Charles, thanks for your time.
Likewise.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back. Thanks again to Charles. I booked him about 20 minutes ago, so we do appreciate always when guys give us time on short notice. Kevin, just quickly to finish up that last.
We appreciate anybody that gives us time, but especially the ones on short notice as well.
Exactly. For those who don't know, just real quickly to explain, the CONCACAF Champions Cup was what existed before the CCL. It was done over a 2-week period, just bang, 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 in a tournament format. So this is not quite the same, but still it's a knockout. And for the MLS clubs, I have a suspicion that most of them are going to be out in that first round because they're not going to be prepared and they're not going to put their full attention on it. It's just an excuse to get this thing out of the way. And it's kind of disappointing as both of us have been involved in our club that we follow's long runs in the CCL. Kevin's a little bit longer than mine, but nonetheless, a semifinal run for Toronto, and it's a lot of fun, those tournaments. And I used to love those group stages, and I know there's a lot of fans here in Toronto. They're going to miss them a lot.
You know how I view it? I view it as the CONCACAF raising the white flag and trying to hype the CONCACAF Champions League as a Champions League like the UEFA Champions League is. I think they're just, all right, we tried, we gave it our best, now let's go back to what the club wants and not what we want.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I suppose that you could argue that the first phase, that tournament that's going to happen in this fall with the smaller clubs is beneficial. I don't think there's any reason they couldn't have still had that to get a spot in or something. Like there's a way that you could add both. You could even had some kind of UEFA Cup sort of situation there too. UEFA Cup. I am really showing my age now. Europa League. All right, Kevin. Let's move on to a more serious story that I wanted to draw some attention to. It was in the Toronto Sun, the other day. Paul James is a Canadian international, a former Canadian international, was on both the 84 Olympic team that went to the quarterfinals at the 84 Olympics and nearly got past Brazil, and obviously one of the 86 members. Paul James has struggled with addiction for a lot of his adult life. This came out in a book that came out a few years ago. He used to coach the York University Lions back in the early days as that program became one of the powerhouses in CIS. In fact, I'd say it is the powerhouse in CIS soccer, the York Lions right now, a program that was very much run like an NCAA program, and I think could probably compete with some top NCAA programs if they were ever given the opportunity to compete in cross competition that way. But anyway, Paul had a story on Bell Let's Talk Day, which was last Wednesday, 2 days ago.
Yeah, well, he created that story. It was not necessarily promoted by Bell Let's Talk, but it happened on that day because he took advantage of everybody talking about mental illness issues and talking about his issues of drug addiction not being considered a mental illness everywhere in the society and basically losing everything because of it.
Yeah. long story short, he has said that he is jobless, has not had a job since he lost his job at York University, which he lost because he admitted that he was a crack cocaine user at that particular point in time. And as an educational institution, I guess they made the decision that that went against the morals clause that they would have had in the contract with him, and they let him go. He was been unable to find work since that time. He's still struggling with addiction by all accounts, and he is currently homeless. This again is a member of Canada's 1986 World Cup squad, 1984 Olympic squad. We're talking about an Olympian and a World Cup participant. So
And
this is
by
a sad story.
yeah, very sad story. By all account, Paul Dolan, former teammates of his, now living in Vancouver, gave his thoughts about it yesterday, saying that they were very surprised because he was always a very articulate, very smart, intelligent player, man, coach, and a very good educator. And they were surprised because for them it truly meant, look, it can happen to anybody. It's not necessarily an indication of your nature, your character, an indication of some flaws, but we're all flawed. It is an addiction. It is a disease. It is a mental health issue as well. It does create some. It leads to some. So no, it we need to take some time, and like especially on his case, because he's not necessarily able to function on a day-to-day basis. He wasn't able to have a job, and then if you can't get a job, you don't have an address to. It's all a vicious circle. And for crack cocaine users or addicted addicts, basically, there's a big stigma on that type of drug as well, that people judge you and label you as a literally a nutcase, and not want to help you the way you need to be helped. And it's usually judgment and then help. You need to be helped. Is there somewhere?
Yeah, look, I was at a charity event. I guess it would have been 5 years ago now, where Paul James was involved in that event. So at that particular time, he obviously was stable enough that he was able to still participate, as sort of who he was as a former professional soccer player. That's the thing, though. Addiction can be a bit hidden, right? Like, you can hide it a little bit. Rob Ford, the deceased former mayor of Toronto, obviously everyone knows who he is and his crack issues at the time. It's something that he was able to hide for years. So it is, the addiction in many ways is the hidden mental illness. And I do agree with his statement about how addiction deserves to get a little more attention when we're getting into some of the issues around Bell Let's Talk. And, if you want to go out and read some issues that people have with that day, there are a lot of concerns some people have there. I view it as, even though it may not be perfect, it is an initiative that does get people talking as it's supposed to, and does raise some money, which is why I supported it. And I do thank everyone that retweeted my tweet that day. I ended up making about $160 to the 6 million or so that was there. So we played our role.
No, exactly. And Duane, there's always good and bad from every thing that humans do, and there is some counter aspect. There's been some controversies and individual case of people not necessarily being recognized as mental health patients working for Bell and been dismissed over the years. Yeah, of course you're gonna find needles in the haystack, but I think the benefit of that day outweighs what negativity you can find if you really look deep down. I think on a national and now in almost international level, at least one day a year, people are feeling open enough to actually talk about it.
Yes, exactly. If you want to know the issues that people have with it, they think that basically it focuses too much exclusively on heterosexual white women, but the rest of it, the world is ignored, and that's the criticism of it. I think that's a simplistic criticism, is what I'll say. I think that maybe we need to focus on the grander question, and if it is in fact over focusing on that, then at least it is focusing on an aspect which then can trickle down to other people. That's my position on Bell Let's Talk. But I do think that I did want to bring up the Paul James story, because it is a particularly sad story about how even athletes can fall to this, and athletes that have been to the highest level. And in fact, we look at other sports, and we look at some of the the deaths that have even happened amongst some tough guy hockey players in recent days. That I'm thinking of the fella from Winnipeg that took his own life because of his addictions too. So, yeah.
But you're talking about stress as a whole, Duane. Even it can cause to mental health problems, or just health problems. There's a very interesting article that's not soccer related, but the former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, Dan Reeves. I remember the year where his team was going to the Super Bowl. At one point, I think with 3 games to go, he felt a little tingling. He felt a little sensation, and it was signs of a heart attack. And he tells a team doctor, he's in there in the plane, and the team doctor was present, so he talked to him, and he's like, "Yeah, so let's make me fine for 3 weeks, and we'll deal with it after." Doctor's like, "No, you're overstressed. You're gonna have a heart attack. If not having one right now, we're not waiting 3 weeks. We're getting you into care." And the head coach of the Denver Broncos in the NFL, just Gary Kubiak, and just decided to it's not Gary Kubiak, it's another name that I forgot, but anyways, he stepped down for health reasons for the same thing. Athletes as a whole, the pressure, the soccer players as a whole, big names, even just regular players, the pressure of the lifestyle of every day, the grind, the hustle, the pressure that builds and builds and builds, if it's not dealt with, can create mental health issues, addictions, and literally health issues.
Yeah, I actually do think that Bell Talk has done a good job at addressing sort of that toughness thing. And I think maybe that's because Claire Hughes is the woman behind it. Like it's sort of the most visual face to it. And Claire Hughes, for those that don't know, is one of the greatest athletes that Canada has ever produced, and likely the toughest woman that Canada has ever produced, period, end of story. She's a remarkable athlete that has done remarkable things. So I do think that the athlete side of things is something that it's addressed quite well, that we need to get past this machoism that's out there. And that exists on the female side of sports too, that you have to be tough and you have to be, powerful, and you don't let your feelings, your silly little feelings, get in the way of your performance. And I think that we kind of are now understanding that that's toxic. And
hashtag Real Talk Fridays.
Yeah. All right. We wish Paul James well. Other quickly, just before on another more serious note, I guess this is less serious than this, but it is, unfortunate note, we'll say. I got notification today that the Kingston League One Ontario team has been forced to shut down its operations for 2017, which is going to take the opportunity to play in League One Ontario off the charts for a lot of people in Eastern Ontario, which is an underrepresented part of the country. They're looking for sponsorship. They're looking for someone to step up, a business or an individual even, that wants to help them so that they can get that program back going in 2018. I'm going to try and get the more information on this and get it out to people out there. If you are a business person listening to us in Eastern Ontario, even if you're a business person anywhere in the country that just wants to support local soccer, they're looking for some sponsorship. They'll probably support you by, something on the jersey, whatever, they can work that out with you. But let's get Kingston back into League One Ontario, because we need Eastern Ontario represented. Kevin, on that note, unless you have any final thoughts, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll look at the FA Cup weekend.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Milk. Ugh. It's what Ian Rush drinks. Ian Rush? Yeah, and he said if I didn't drink lots of milk, when I grow up, I'm going to be good enough to play for Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley? Who are they? Exactly. Nah, get off.
Get off. Nah, get off. Duane, do you know who Accrington Stanley are?
I do, but not a lot of people did. That, for those that don't know, is a famous advert in the UK from the 70s, I believe, where there was 2 young kids. You've probably seen it if you're UK. I know you have. If you're not, just type in milk. I always
MILK, not ME, but yeah, milk with Accrington Stanley.
Yes, I have an Eastern Ontario accent. And in Eastern Ontario, we say milk. But at any rate, roof and milk. Nonetheless,
where are you? Get out the roof. Get off the roof.
You can take the kid out of the Ottawa Valley, but you can't take the Ottawa Valley out of the kid. Anyway, Kevin, you wanted to talk about Accrington Stanley
Yep,
and the history there. And
exactly. Well, I've talked about Lincoln and Sutton over the last few weeks. Sutton still in the FA Cup as we speak, very surprisingly. But another team here that got my attention is Accrington Stanley, a League Two side once again, now present in the fourth round of the FA Cup, playing Middlesbrough and at Borough, by the way. So Stanley might have a chance to pull off the upset. I doubt it, but Accrington Stanley, interesting history, Duane. A club that was originally formed in 1891, but it collapsed in 1966. And in 1966, there was rumbling already. In October 1968, there was a meeting in the town library, and they decided to, initiated by Stanley Worthington, they decided to revive. And in August 70, the new club played at a new ground, the Crown Ground. The Crown was named after a famous pub in Accrington Stanley. But Accrington Stanley, that's why they were popular in the early 70s. Well, at least because of that advert, it was like a Phoenix club that was regenerated from the 1891 history club that was present before. And they had a lot of difficulty being in League One, then the bottom of literally non-league football, and come back to play league football. But in the late 90s, because of great clauses of transfer, and Duane, we talk a lot about sometimes players that get created at an academy, get trained at an academy and eventually sell to a little bigger club and eventually another bigger club. That's a situation that happened here with Brett Ornerod in the December 2001 transfer. He was a former Stanley star and he was signed for Southampton for big money. But because he had a club between the two, the club was Blackpool. It was $1 million paid for Blackpool for Ornerod. But Blackpool bought that player from Accrington Stanley and had a deal with them to look, if we sell him on for more money, we'll give you quarter if you let us have this player. And that's what happens. So that big £250,000 in early 2000 was able to get that club up and running at a higher level. For them now to 2017, we're talking, they're in League Two. They're having a very decent season in League Two. They're in the fourth round of the FA Cup, making a name for themselves, and player maybe even will be sold on, and that cycle will continue and that club will continue to grow. But that story, I think, is important. And sometimes we forget how £250,000 can do for a small club, how it can launch them on the right direction.
Well, no, precisely. And that kind of is the less, it's not the magic of the cup, but it's the pragmatism of the cup that does matter there as well when you're talking about the money that they do get from these fixtures. Actually, Stanley is a team that I think they're a club that a lot of people in the UK that are of a certain age will always look at a little fondly, because they'll have a little chuckle about that laugh, the exactly that comes out of it. But nonetheless,
who are they exactly? So
exactly.
If you have learned something from soccer today, drink your milk. Ian Rush says drink your milk so you don't end up at a lousy club like Accrington Stanley.
Exactly. All right. Looking through the rest of these lineups here, I do like the Black Derby, the Blackburn Blackpool. That one intrigues me on some level for some reason. I'm a simple man, really, when you get right down to it.
Burn or pool, so you have the chance of either getting burned or going for a swim.
Yes, exactly. I mentioned that my uncle who passed away was a big Bristol City fan, so I will be cheering for them to get past Burnley as well to continue his legacy as long as they don't draw Man City. Man City, of course, played Crystal Palace. That game's kind of maybe the least interesting one on the docket, to be honest with you, and it's not even on TV, which is kind of irritating me, but nonetheless.
Exactly. Yeah. Millwall, Watford, a great game if you were in the Premier League in the early 90s, late 80s.
Exactly. Huddersfield and Rochdale, one of those teams is going to advance. That's why that's interesting, and that's the great thing about an open draw. And I do love the kind of open draws. And I hope that to get back to some CCL talk or CCL talk, that maybe they do an open draw. I think that would make me a little more interested in this competition rather than seeding it. So these Mexican teams are basically guaranteed to play each other in the final. Just make it an open draw.
America versus Santos Laguna, first round. Come on, let's make it happen. So at least an MLS Cup or another team has got a chance to win the whole thing.
Yeah, and then you have like I don't know Harborview versus whatever Puerto Rico Islanders or something in another matchup. I think that would be more interesting if you did it as a fully open draw throughout the competition. But nonetheless, look, any other games jumping out at this right now? Chelsea's playing Brentford. You'd have to think they'd get past that. Spurs, Wycombe, Lincoln City, Brighton. Just going through these Liverpool Wolves. It'd be interesting to actually Liverpool Wolves has some interest to me because Wolves is a decent side, and Liverpool's coming off the disappointment of this past week. They're not actually doing very well. It's 1-7 right now, and we mentioned last week how Klopp's record right now isn't maybe as good as people think. It's similar to what Van Gaal's was at the same time as his tenure at United. So that's going to be intriguing.
Speaking of Cup, you all seen this week during the EFL Cup as well, where Hull City eliminated Manchester United and Southampton eliminated Liverpool. Two opposite result that everybody was expecting.
Hull City won, but they didn't eliminate them. The United won the first game. So.
Oh, sorry, I was misled United, there. But Southampton at least eliminated Liverpool. I know that.
Yeah, so Southampton and Manchester United will be the outcome. Yeah, United won the first leg 2-0, and Hull City won the second leg 2-1. And Mourinho refused to believe that United lost in the post-game thing. He refused to acknowledge that they lost the game because the penalty call against them was wrong. Only Mourinho.
Yeah, he's like 19-19. That's good. It's good. Defeated.
Yes. Speaking of United, it's some stupid right. This is the 56th consecutive FA Cup game that they've been on TV. That is rare for anyone to get past 2 or 3 before they don't get a TV fixture, but they always find a way to get United on there, which actually causes more controversy in the UK than we would think of, because they look at the BBC as broadcasting this, and they should be doing the public service rather than just appeasing United fans and looking for the highest rating. But I think I'm beating my head against a wall when I
yeah. But Duane, it's public service, so it's kind of like in your service to do good for the public in a way of getting more advertisers dollars, and if you have more viewers,
well, they don't advertise the dollars on the BBC though.
Yeah, true, but sponsors and like on the board, you know what I mean. But anyways, yes. Yeah, I can understand where if your club is never shown on TV, where that can rub you the wrong way.
Yeah, you'd rather, and I get it too. Like even like I can, I'm joking a bit, but only because I want to watch it. But I can live without City being on TV against Crystal Palace because I recognize that game in terms of an FA Cup competition is kind of not very interesting. It's just a, top of the table versus bottom of the table Premier League fixture, which they see every weekend. Whereas I can look at this and say, well, let's look at Lincoln City Brighton. You have an up-and-coming team in Brighton. Lincoln City's kind of an underdog story here. That'd be more fun to watch. You want to watch, some of these the teams try and knock someone off, right? Like that's the kind of games you want to see. Sutton Leeds would be an interesting game because you have a team that's so far down the table playing such an historical big name. That is still possible. You could see Sutton somehow pulling that off because Leeds isn't at the top anymore, but it'd be, what a scalp for them if they could get it. Those are the type of games that you kind of want to see. But instead, and I think you are going to see the Sutton Leeds game because it's a standalone game. So it's going to be broadcast. All the Sunday games will be. But instead what you're going to get is United Wigan, which is not very compelling at all. But at any rate,
by the way, it's 2017. All the games should be available, period. If it's not on your tele, could be on your computer. It's 2017.
I don't quite understand why they don't stream them, and I don't know whether that might be a quality issue or something that they don't want to ever show their product in a less than perfect way.
You can broadcast HD live on Facebook that looks better than your television, so it's not an issue anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it is if you're trying to show a friendly in Bermuda, apparently, but that's a flashback to Canada's friendly last weekend.
It's a lack of will. That's why you have bad streams. It's not a lack of feasibility. It's a lack of wanting to spend that money to get that good stream. Fine, but it's not if you really want to do it, you can do it pretty cheaply, but you still need the ambition to want to do it. If you just want to put it out there to appease a certain amount of people, then yeah, you're going to try to cut and just put a camera there and that doesn't move. And it is possible in 2017 to do a broadcast of a game way cheaper than 15 years ago, but you still need to want to do it.
Yeah. It still baffles me that the FA has not set up some kind of like universal streaming system that you can pay for, like, you know,
FA
£100
Cup
a year or
Live,
something.
FA Cup Live, you pay $100 for the year or £75, whatever the case may be, and you have every single game of the FA Cup that you want on any platform that you want.
Hell yeah, charge £150 and expand it so you can watch any League Two game you want or whatever conference game. Like you could get that far down the pipe. If you
well, exactly. Why not?
Yeah. All right. Before we solve all the UK's broadcasting issues, we probably should say goodbye on the day, unless you have any final thoughts, Kevin.
No. Stay tuned to Soccer Today Monday for the next live show. For Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute. You can follow myself on Twitter at Kevin Laramee, and follow the show at Soccer Today at Soccer Today SPN. Tell a friend. Help us get more soccer fans listening to Soccer Today, because, well, you'll be the most informed soccer fan out there. And until Monday for the next edition, have a great FA Cup and a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.